This area's for real veterans, ma'am, not tourists playing hero. That's what the guard scoffed, just as her jacket slipped. Across her back, a long scar curved like wings, slicing through a map of Iran. A student snickered. Guess someone got lost on Google Earth. The crowd chuckled. Cameras turned on. She didn't flinch. But a general nearby did. He froze, eyes locked on that scar, and pulled out a secure satellite phone. 6 coded words followed, words that hadn't been heard since Tehran, 2011. Featherblind flight path confirmed. Pilot is alive! Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Veteran Biker, where truth leaves a mark and silence makes history. The morning haze above Doha had barely lifted when the gates to the 2025 Doha International Airshow opened to the public. Military officers, diplomats, aviation enthusiasts, and media crews flowed in through the arched glass doors like a tide, greeted by banners in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. Inside, the sprawling convention halls buzzed with drone simulations, next-gen fighter previews, and augmented reality recreations of famous combat missions. And then there was Hall B, the quietest yet most heavily guarded section of the entire show, the historical flight operations zone. Colleen Harper waited in line. She looked like someone who didn't belong. Mid-40s, hair tied back in a no-nonsense bun, dusty boots, and a faded olive jacket that clashed with the sharp suits and dress uniforms around her. A press pass swung from her neck, civilian category. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes scanned everything. Guard positions, exit points, surveillance angles. She kept a low profile. She'd learned how. Ahead of her, a group of young Iranian aviation students laughed and nudged each other. One of them, Reza Moini, glanced back at her and smirked. "You here for the food court or the cosplay?" Colleen didn't respond. The line moved. She stepped forward. When she reached the security desk, a young Qatari officer looked at her ID, then at the screen. "This area's for real veterans, ma'am," he said, sliding her badge back. "Not tourists playing hero." Colleen didn't flinch. She simply reached for the lanyard and tucked it into her jacket. As she turned, a gust of air swept through the hall. Her jacket shifted just enough to slip off her shoulder, and that's when the laughing stopped. Across her back, etched like a scar burned into memory, was a long, jagged line that spanned her shoulder blades and curved down along her spine. Not random, not cosmetic. It looked like a flight path, one with dangerous angles, evasive loops, and a sharp final descent. It looked deliberate. Reza blinked. "Is that a Google Maps tattoo?" Another student laughed. Others pulled out their phones. Someone muttered, "That's Iran's northern corridor, right through the no-fly zone." Colleen said nothing. She pulled her jacket back over her shoulder and began to walk away, ignoring the tightening circle of curiosity around her. But someone had seen it, and he wasn't laughing. General Ilan Zarahi stood 50 feet away, halfway through a conversation with a U.S. Navy admiral. His voice faltered, his hand trembled slightly as he excused himself and turned toward the woman disappearing into the crowd. He reached into his coat and pulled out a satellite phone, the kind only used by high command veterans still carrying authorization codes. He pressed one button, waited, and when the other end picked up, he said only 6 words: "Featherblind flight path confirmed. Pilot is alive." The line went silent. Then came the response, "Are you absolutely sure?" I'd recognize that scar in my grave. "Initiate back channel. Now." In less than 60 seconds, the airshow's internal security grid lit up, facial recognition pinged, internal intel tags updated. 3 plainclothes agents redirected their path toward Colleen. She was already halfway down the concourse when one of them approached her shoulder. "Ma'am, he said quietly, showing her a badge that didn't exist on any public record. "We need you to come with us." Colleen glanced at the emblem. Mossad. She didn't hesitate. They turned off the main concourse and ducked through a service hallway, bypassing civilian areas. Doors closed behind them. Outside, the students were still joking. Reza uploaded a clip of her scar to his private story with the caption, "Lost vet thinks she's Maverick." He didn't notice that the clip failed to upload, or that his phone had just gone offline. In a back corridor near the restricted Zone E, Colleen was escorted into a windowless room with dark walls and no visible recording devices. General Zarahi entered 30 seconds later. His face was pale. "Is it really you?" Colleen took off her jacket. She turned around. The general sat down. 20 years, and you never surfaced. Not a single file, not a whisper. They said Featherblind was a myth. Colleen didn't blink. It was supposed to be... He stared at the scar. A curved trajectory, the exact path a pilot would take to avoid Iran's air defense nets while flying into the heart of Tehran. "You flew it, alone," she nodded. Zarahi leaned back, his voice barely audible. "You got them out, the engineers, the data, the pilot logs, everything, and vanished," she said, "because that was the deal." His voice hardened. "They erased you. It was part of the price." A knock at the door interrupted them. A younger Israeli intelligence officer entered and handed Zarahi a tablet. He scanned the screen, then looked up. "We just got confirmation from Tel Aviv. The flight path matches the old data fragments from Operation Featherblind. Altitude, velocity, turn angles, even the final descent pattern, all of it." Colleen said nothing. Her expression hadn't changed. Zarahi stood. "They're going to want to see you. Officially." She put the jacket back on. "I didn't come here for recognition. Then why now? Why this place?" Colleen finally met his eyes. "Because someone put the flight path in Hall B. And it's wrong." Zarahi frowned. "Wrong how?" "They flipped the corridor. They mapped it west to east. That would mean... They think someone flew out. I flew in." The general stared. Outside, the airshow continued, unaware. But inside that windowless room, the past was being rewritten. And for the first time in 20 years, Colleen Harper's name was being said aloud. Not as a myth, not as a rumor, but as a scar that finally spoke. Outside the secure room where Colleen Harper and General Zarahi sat, the atmosphere inside the airshow continued in full swing. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Invisible to the average guest, a high-level protocol had been quietly activated within the show's command center. Eyes were now on Colleen, and a flurry of encrypted messages surged through military and diplomatic networks around the globe. Meanwhile, in the command tower above Hall C, a Qatari military official named Colonel Farid al-Rashid received a priority alert on a secure console. He read the flagged transcript, then looked at the photo of the woman who had just triggered an intelligence cascade. He tapped the console. "Bring her to briefing room Delta, immediately, and prepare a level 5 clearance sweep." Downstairs, Reza Moini was still laughing with his friends. They watched the last few seconds of Colleen disappearing behind a security checkpoint. He refreshed his social feed. "Weird," he said. "My story didn't upload." His friend tapped his own screen. "None of mine are working either." Their feeds had been jammed. Every clip they tried to send, deleted. Every message, blocked. A system-wide interference field had been activated over Hall B and its surrounding concourses. Security quietly increased. Plainclothes agents were reassigned. Several international observers began to notice the shift in tone, the sudden appearance of serious faces near the Israeli and US delegations. But no announcements were made. Inside briefing room Delta, Colleen sat across from General Zarahi at a long table lined with matte black surface panels. The room had no windows, only soft recessed lighting and 3 sealed doors. A Qatari intelligence officer stood in the corner, silent. Zerahi set down a secure tablet and turned it toward her. "This is the reconstructed path of Operation Featherblind, based on all the data we salvaged." Colleen looked at it. The route was accurate, mostly, but not in the way that mattered. "You think the operation was an exfiltration," she said. "But you're missing the first half." "You mean the insertion?" Zerahi asked. She shook her head. "I mean the risk." He leaned forward. "We lost 3 agents in the planning alone. Tehran was locked down. No one could get in, not without triggering every alarm, but someone managed to reach the engineers." "Not someone," Colleen said. "Me." She stood and walked to the side wall where a digital display flickered. With a few swipes, she began drawing the original flight path. "I came in from the east, under civilian radar, piggybacking a Red Crescent aid flight until the last possible second. Then I dropped low, under 400 feet, to avoid the SAM zones. I flew through the smog layer, blind, and landed at a construction site south of District 8. The officer in the corner finally spoke. "In what aircraft?" "Modified G-146 transport, civilian markings, fake ID. Only 1 seat had ejection capabilities." Zerahi looked stunned. "And you got out?" 2 hours later. 3 engineers, 1 wounded. I dumped the transponder, rerouted through Iraqi airspace and faked engine failure over Kuwait to land undetected. The Qatari officer raised an eyebrow. "Why wasn't this reported?" Colleen gave him a flat look. "Because no one wanted a female contractor from a Black Ops division getting credit for rescuing Mossad agents from Tehran." Zerahi nodded slowly. "They buried you." She sat again. "They needed the mission to exist without the pilot." He turned to the Qatari officer. "We need a back channel to Tel Aviv. Now." The officer left. Zerahi took a deep breath. "Do you have any idea what's happening out there?" "Since you walked in, 4 different nations have activated Silent Watch protocols. The Iranian delegation has issued an internal protest. And the Americans, well, they're pretending they don't know you. They never did, not officially." Zerahi leaned back. "Why show up now? Why let the scar be seen?" Colleen hesitated. For a moment her eyes flicked toward the corner of the room as if weighing a memory against the air. "Because they put it in Hall B." "Put what?" "My flight path. It's part of the historical conflict simulations display. But they got it wrong. They honored the mission, but not the risk. They showed only the way out, not the way in." He stared at her. "You came to correct history." She didn't answer, but the silence was enough. Moments later, a technician entered with a new tablet. Zerahi reviewed it. "Tel Aviv confirms they're sending authorization to declassify segments of the Featherblind data archive and to restore your personnel file." Colleen raised an eyebrow. "My file was deleted. Backups existed, but they were compartmentalized under foreign asset protection, not active duty. We found it under a code name, Vulture Echo." She exhaled slowly. "That was the mission tag. They reused it after me." Zerahi stood. "Then let's put your name back where it belongs." Back outside, the students still loitered near Hall B. Reza watched as 2 guards now stood at the previously open entrance. His friends had grown quiet. "Something's going on," he muttered. A new figure arrived, a woman in her 30s wearing a crisp blue flight suit with an IAF badge. She scanned the group. "Which one of you posted the video?" Reza hesitated. "I did. But it didn't go through." She nodded. "It won't, and you need to come with me." "Am I in trouble?" "Not yet. But if you want to understand what you just witnessed, you'll need context." She led him away. In the private simulation chamber behind Hall B, a group of senior personnel from multiple nations gathered around a reconstructed cockpit rig. The G-146 was there, digitally modeled, weathered and precise. Colleen approached it in silence. "Everything calibrated?" she asked. A technician nodded. As close to your original specs as we could manage. Altitude control, wind vector variance, even radio silence protocols. Zarahi stood behind her. We want to see if it was possible. If you can do it again. She climbed into the cockpit. As the canopy closed and the room darkened, the simulation came alive. City lights flickered below. Anti-air batteries glowed red. A heartbeat monitor pulsed. She took the controls and flew. Outside the simulator, no one spoke. The telemetry streamed in. Altitude drops, velocity shifts, bank turns so tight they defied conventional modeling. At one point, the simulated radar sweep buzzed into a warning zone. Colleen cut power, adjusted pitch, and slid under the alert arc with 3 meters to spare. Someone exhaled. A Mossad analyst murmured, "No one should be able to do that manually." But she did. 28 minutes later, she landed. When the canopy lifted, Colleen looked exhausted, but calm. Zarahi leaned in. "We're making an announcement. Tomorrow, your name will be part of the exhibit." She stepped down. "Make sure they get the direction right." He smiled. "They will." Across the exhibit floor, a single photo was uploaded to a secured archive. It showed the scar across her back, overlaid with the matching flight path. Its caption read, "She didn't fly to escape. She flew to rescue." And finally, the world began to remember. The sun had dipped lower over the desert horizon, casting long golden streaks across the towering glass panels of the Doha International Airshow venue. Outside, the public still wandered the exhibits, unaware that history was rewriting itself just a few meters below their feet. Inside Hall B, the historical flight operation zone had been sealed off with a blunt, sterile sign, "Restricted access, exhibit under revision." The air was tense, security hovered, eyes watched too closely, and yet no one knew exactly what they were watching for. Reza Moini stood outside the barrier, pulse still racing. His mind replayed the scar, the moment, the laughter, followed by silence. The woman who'd walked away hadn't just rattled the exhibit. She'd shaken something deeper. Beside him, Captain Leah Navot of the Israeli Air Force stood with arms crossed, posture taut. Her eyes scanned the crowd, but her words were razor-sharp. "You saw something you weren't meant to understand." Reza's breath hitched. "She's just a woman. Why is everyone acting like she's a ghost?" "Because for 20 years she was," Leah answered. "They buried her behind redactions and ashes. No name, no rank, just coordinates, and even those were classified. But she's American?" She was, until the system she served decided she wasn't convenient. Reza said nothing, but the weight of it sank in. Inside the simulator chamber, Colleen Harper sat alone. Her jacket was slung on a chair. A damp towel clung to her neck. Her breath had steadied, but her eyes were still war-weathered. Around her, techs and observers murmured like they'd seen something unholy, a ghost wrapped in steel. General Zarahi stood in the shadows, conferring with Mossad Director Avram Keller. "Telemetry doesn't lie," Avram said. 0.02% margin. No drift, no recalibration, and she did it from memory. She flew through that city like it owed her nothing, Zarahi murmured. She flew it like it never forgot her. Avram took a long pause. "We owe her more than a debrief. We owe her the room." Minutes later, Avram approached Colleen. Closed-door briefing, 40 minutes, coalition reps, NATO, Mossad, and your country's handlers. You're going to want to be in that room. Colleen didn't look up. "I'm not interested in handshakes. It's not a ceremony. It's a reckoning." She stood, her voice quiet but steel core. "Then I speak last." Elsewhere in the venue, Colonel Farid al-Rashid stood in a shadowed operations suite beneath the main terminal. Surveillance feeds blinked around him. He shut them down one by one. "Scrub everything from Hall B 0900 to 1530, audio, video, personnel logs. Nothing leaves this floor." The French liaison beside him nodded slowly. "You're choosing the narrative? I'm choosing silence. Until we know who we're dealing with." In a sunken briefing room with blackout glass and biometric locks, the most powerful defense figures in the region gathered. The air was chilled, but no one relaxed. General Zerahi took the podium. Operation Featherblind was executed on March 27, 2011. It was marked a one-way mission, no rescue, no return. Its pilot was erased from the record, but she returned alone and was buried for it. He tapped a remote. Behind him, satellite images flickered, Tehran's skyline overlaid by red vectors, then a jagged spiral. Finally, a photo. The scar, a breath caught. A German general muttered, "Mein Gott." Zerahi's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Each burn follows a turn she took, each twist through enemy airspace. They weren't drawn after. They were etched into her skin as a map. By fire. Who authorized it? Someone demanded. You did. All of you. Collectively. Through silence. Then the door opened. Colleen Harper entered. Olive jacket, boots dusty, no entourage, no insignia, only gravity. She walked to the front, stood beside Zerahi, took the mic. "You don't remember me, that's fine. I was told to vanish before you ever had to." She stared them down. 3 engineers, Mossad contractors, left behind during an op that never existed. "I flew into Tehran at night. No armaments, no cover. I picked them up bleeding, praying and carrying things we were all told didn't exist." A long pause. The room held its breath. "I brought them home, and instead of thanks I got deletion. Not even denial, just erasure. Because no one wanted the ending to be a woman." She dropped the mic to the podium. Not slammed, just released. No one moved for several seconds. Then, slowly, General Zerahi stood, followed by one admiral, then another, until the room was on its feet. That night, Hall B went dark, then reopened under floodlights. Curators removed the original exhibit, replaced the schematic, added new telemetry, this time with approval. At the center, the scar's path, laser-etched in chrome. Below it, Colleen Harper, Operation Featherblind, direction, inbound. No ribbon cutting, no anthem, just truth. She didn't attend the dedication. Instead, she sat near the G-146 sim. Alone, Leah Navot found her. "They're calling it the bravest flight never flown." Colleen chuckled. "Too bad I did." Leah handed her a box. Inside, the mission patch, a feather over a skyline. Colleen held it like it was heavier than steel. "You kept this? Mossad never deletes everything." Colleen smiled, soft, honest. She didn't cry, she didn't need to. The scar already had. By sunrise, headlines circled the globe. Speculation, denial, heroism. Tehran called it fabricated Western valor. Washington issued no comment, but behind closed doors, files moved, eyes turned inward. At a quiet jetway, Colleen boarded a silent plane. No logos, no escort. General Zerahi met her before the stairs. "Where to next?" "Anywhere they forgot to bury." He offered his hand. She took it, then vanished into the hatch. Behind her, under artificial light, the new map glowed. And this time, the arrow didn't point home. It pointed into the fire, where she'd always gone. The next morning, Doha woke to headlines it didn't expect. While the International Airshow continued with its parade of drones, stealth aircraft and industry showcases, a quieter storm rolled through diplomatic circles. News had broken of a previously unknown mission, Operation Featherblind, and of a pilot whose scar matched a route no radar had ever officially recorded. Major outlets treaded carefully. CNN ran a segment with blurred footage, unconfirmed veteran linked to covert 2011 rescue. Al Jazeera aired a split-screen image, one side showing Hall B's updated exhibit, the other zoomed in on the jagged scar. Sky News posed the question outright: who is Colleen Harper, and why was she erased? Inside a classified meeting room at the US Embassy in Doha, chaos brewed. Two American diplomats, one Pentagon liaison, and a shadowy man from the CIA stared at the looping playback of Colleen's flight simulation. "She was off our books," the CIA man muttered. "Her file was rerouted in 2012. Vulture Echo was shut down." "Except it wasn't," said the liaison, throwing a file down. "They kept logs. The Israelis have the telemetry. They just made us look like idiots." The ambassador tapped his pen. "And now she's a global headline. We need to contain this. She's not under our command. She was never supposed to be known." "Well," the ambassador said dryly, "she just got a wing in Hall B." Meanwhile, back at the airfield, Colleen sat alone in a quiet hangar, watching a team disassemble the G-146 simulator rig. Captain Leah Navot approached with 2 coffees. She handed one over. "You sleep?" Colleen took the cup. Didn't try. Leah sat beside her. "They're pissed." "Which ones?" "All of them. But mostly the Americans. They spent 2 decades pretending you didn't exist. Now you're trending worldwide." Colleen sipped slowly. "Good. Let them feel it. Zerahi wants to debrief you again. He already knows the story, but not all of it." Colleen set the cup down. Her eyes darkened. "Then let's talk about the part that never made the files." Flashback. March 27th, 2011. Tehran, 0200 hours. Night over the capital was thick with smog and silence. Colleen's G-146, flying dark, skimmed low over rooftops as it descended toward an unmarked construction zone. A signal beacon blinked from a single rooftop. Her co-pilot, a Mossad handler named Eli Shafir, watched the altimeter. Altitude 370. "You sure about this drop point?" "No," Colleen replied, "but it's the only one we got." As she leveled out, anti-air defense zones crackled on her radar. She cut throttle, dipped under the last sweep, and prepared for a rough landing. They touched down hard. Dust exploded into the cabin. Colleen yanked her harness. 2 minutes. You stay with the bird." She grabbed a med pack, a folded stretcher, and her sidearm. Then she ran down an alley, past shuttered stalls, into the ruins of a half-collapsed safe house. Inside were 3 men, one unconscious, one holding pressure to a bleeding leg, one barely breathing. "You must be Vulture," one of them gasped. "You must be dying," she replied, kneeling. She assessed the injuries, triaged on instinct, and stabilized the worst. Then she loaded them onto the stretchers and dragged them back the way she came. Not a single shot fired, not a single radio call made. She reached the aircraft just as Iranian sirens began to wail. "We're blown," Eli said. "Something triggered. We've got 5 minutes, tops." Colleen threw the wounded on board, yanked the hatch and took the seat. "Then we don't waste time." The takeoff was violent. She banked hard west, took a hit of shrapnel on the port wing, and lost altitude for 10 seconds. Then she recovered. The border with Iraq was less than 60 miles. Back in the hangar, Colleen stopped her story. Leah whispered, "That was never in the report, because no one wrote it. I didn't file one. I didn't debrief. I disappeared. And Eli, dead. Shot in Kuwait 3 days later. Disavowed." Leah exhaled. "So you really were the last ghost." Colleen didn't answer. Later that afternoon, General Zerahi stood before a classified press circle. Behind him, a massive visual of the revised Hall B exhibit was displayed. "We confirm that Colleen Harper conducted a single aircraft blind entry operation into Tehran on March 27th, 2011. Her actions directly resulted in the recovery of 3 intelligence assets. The mission was previously buried for political reasons. It is now declassified." A reporter raised a hand. "Will she receive formal recognition?" Zerahi replied, "She already has, not with medals, with truth." Another asked, "Will the US military corroborate her involvement?" He paused. "Ask them." That evening, the United States Department released a 6-sentence statement. "We are aware of the reports concerning an individual known as Colleen Harper. While the department has no public comment on classified operations, we acknowledge her contributions to global security efforts. We are reviewing internal records for appropriate historical acknowledgement, which meant nothing. Colleen read it while sitting on a metal step outside her quarters. She laughed once, dry, short. Captain Leah sat beside her. "I've seen that laugh before," she said. "Yeah?" "Yeah. My mother used it when the system called her brave after ignoring her for 10 years. Colleen nodded slowly. "That sounds about right." Leah offered her a packet. Inside, an invitation. "Private audience with the Emir of Qatar. You should go." Colleen looked at it, then handed it back. "No need. The people who matter have already heard me." Leah accepted that. "Then what's next?" Colleen stood. "I walk away, again, but this time not invisible." She looked out across the airstrip, where the G-146 simulator was being boxed for transport. Let them tell it however they want. The sky remembers. The desert sun burned high over Doha on the 5th day of the airshow. Delegations moved like synchronized shadows between sealed pavilions and private briefings, but beneath every polished handshake, Operation Featherblind continued to ripple like a fault line cracking open. 10 kilometers off-site, a secure NATO liaison hub buzzed with encrypted traffic. Inside a glass-walled room, representatives from MI6, BND, CSIS and others sat around a matte black table. On the central screen, a freeze frame of Colleen Harper mid-speech. "She doesn't exist in any registry," said Colonel Marianne Schultz of the Bundeswehr. "No license, no military file, no passport trail. That's because she was burned off the grid," muttered the MI6 officer. "Ghost class, no redundancy. No extraction rights." "Which makes her an anomaly," the Canadian analyst added. "No," Schultz said. "It makes her a threat." A long pause. Then the British agent leaned in. "It makes her proof." Back at the exhibit grounds, Hall B had reopened, but it didn't feel the same. Crowds moved differently now, slower, softer. The Harper Corridor, freshly renamed, no longer just displayed a map. It felt like a memorial, and at its heart, a new addition stunned everyone. A life-sized holographic projection of Colleen's scar. Etched across a translucent mannequin, it tracked the exact flight path she had taken into Tehran, twisting, diving, looping through Iranian airspace. It wasn't just a line. It moved, animated in sync with wind vectors and infrared terrain shifts. A little girl tugged her mother's sleeve. "Is that real?" A nearby Israeli officer replied. "As real as it gets." Reza Moini stood near the back, eyes fixed. His friends didn't laugh anymore. Leonavot appeared beside him. "Still think she made it up?" He shook his head. "I think I'm the one who did. Come with me. You should see what she changed." That afternoon, Colleen wasn't summoned by generals. She was requested by soldiers. 3 women, different nations, different stories. An American drone pilot, Lieutenant Maya Lin. An Israeli paratrooper Sergeant Yael Tsafrir, a French naval commander, Captain Elodie Marcoux. They met her in a quiet hangar, away from the cameras and ceremony. Maya went first. "They said I was too small to be taken seriously, too soft-spoken, until I saw what you did," Yael added. "They told me no woman had ever jumped into enemy territory solo. Then I trained on your telemetry." Elodie stepped forward. "When they questioned my command, I used your name in silence. No one asked again." Colleen looked at them, and for the first time in days she exhaled without armor. "I didn't do it for legacy." Maya smiled. "Good. Because legacy found you anyway." That night, Colleen returned to Hall B alone. The lights dimmed, the corridors silent. Just the low hum of the projectors and the cold air from the vents. She stood before the hologram, watched the scar play its route again and again, like a heartbeat written in fire. She pulled something from her jacket, an old mission coin, weathered, heavy. One side bore the insignia of Joint Special Operations Aviation Command, the other a feather arcing across a radar wave. She placed it on the base of the projection stand. "You can have the story," she said softly, "but I keep the price." Footsteps. She didn't flinch. "General Zarahi." "You could have walked away. No one would have judged you." Colleen turned. "They already did. That's why I stayed." He nodded slowly. "You made them rewrite the ending." "No," she said. "I just reminded them it wasn't over." Across the city, in a shielded NATO chamber, a new memo circulated. Subject: Harper Colleen. Status review assessment. Reinstate historical classification. Deny operational clearance. Prevent legal action. Sustain public narrative. Strategic value, symbolic potency outweighs tactical risk. Containment achieved. Public sentiment favorable. In simpler terms, she could exist now, as long as she didn't ask to matter again. Morning. Outer tarmac. A retired Blackbird jet cast long shadows across the sand. Beneath it, Colleen sat cross-legged, boots off, back against cold steel. Reza Moini approached, awkward. "I was a jackass when we met." Colleen didn't deny it. "You weren't the only one," she said. He handed her a printout, a screenshot from the sim footage, her in full turn, eyes forward, the cockpit alive with alarms. "My dad used to say courage means showing up even if no one claps." She took the photo, studied it. "You want to post this?" He nodded. "Only if I tell the truth this time. Then show the burn," she said, "not just the beauty." He smiled. "Deal." As the final day of the airshow waned, the Harper corridor remained surrounded. No cameras, no speeches, just people, standing still, watching. A new generation, a new code, a new compass made from scars. High above, a lone fighter broke the sound barrier, and below, the story of a vanished pilot refused to vanish again. To be continued. 3 days after the Doha airshow closed, the exhibit known as the Harper Corridor remained intact, roped off, preserved, and guarded. Dignitaries who had skipped the airshow now arrived discreetly in its aftermath, filing through Hall B in silence. No cameras, no press. Meanwhile, Colleen Harper had disappeared again. No records of departure, no flight manifest, no known hotel checkout. She had, as she once did, evaporated, but not everyone was content to let the silence return. In Tel Aviv, within a secure Mossad archive room, a meeting was underway. Avram Keller, the same director who had witnessed Colleen's simulator flight, tapped the file in front of him. "This," he said, "is the last known asset who completed a high-risk solo infiltration into hostile airspace and returned with 3 intelligence targets. She did it without permission and without leaving a trace." Across from him sat 2 younger operatives, one Israeli, one from the UK's SIS. "And now she's off the board again?" the Brit asked. "Yes, and that's precisely the problem. She wants to disappear." "She deserves not to be hunted," Avram corrected. "But disappearing isn't the same as being forgotten." He slid them a folder. "We're launching a program, not to find her, to follow her lead." Inside the folder, a single line of text: "Operation Echo flight elsewhere." In a small airstrip outside Thessaloniki, Greece, a mechanic leaned out of a hangar as a rust-colored civilian aircraft landed. The woman who stepped out wore civilian boots, jeans, and a plain grey t-shirt. But the way she moved, calculated, alert, balanced, gave her away. "Refuel?" the mechanic called. She nodded. "Also a burner phone and a place to be alone for 6 hours." The mechanic raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Colleen Harper walked across the tarmac, entered the hangar office, and sat. She opened a small metal case and removed an old map, folded, refolded, creased from memory. On it, a dozen markings, not from her past, from somewhere new. She studied them and circled one. In Washington, a junior analyst at the DIA named Marcus Flynn stared at his console. He had no idea who Colleen Harper was until the air show. Now he had her name on a blinking alert. "Sir," he said, calling over his supervisor, "this just popped up on the civilian transponder net. A burner ID pinged in northern Greece. Matches her previous plane signature." The supervisor frowned. "She was supposed to be out. Gone. She's moving. Quietly. Don't flag it." "What, you want the White House involved again after the Featherblind fallout?" "Let her fly. Just mark the path. No action. No contact." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Copy. Shadow protocol only." He watched the line on the screen. Colleen was heading east. Back in Greece, Colleen approached a small farmhouse hidden by olive groves. An old man answered the door. No words, just a silent exchange of recognition. She handed him a coin, not currency, a challenge coin. He nodded and stepped aside. Inside the house, 3 women waited, civilian clothes, military eyes. One had an American accent, one Turkish, one Jordanian. Colleen sat. "You came," the American said. "You called." The Turkish woman spoke. "You were never meant to, which is why I did." They talked about air corridors, about forgotten missions, about patterns in the sky that no satellite could predict. What emerged from that room was a concept. Not a unit, not an army, a network. People who had done the impossible, then been told to forget it. Echo Flight was real, and it had just found its wings. 2 weeks later, in Berlin, during a closed-panel NATO symposium, a German colonel gave a lecture titled "Asymmetric Memory Warfare." His thesis was strange, that control of history could be weaponized, that erasing a name could be more effective than killing it. His final slide, a blurry photo of Colleen Harper, captioned, "Silence is not the absence of history, it is the refusal to admit it." Colleen's aircraft appeared next in Azerbaijan, then vanished. A border radar caught it skimming terrain near the Caspian Sea, then silence, until a journalist from Madrid received an envelope. No return address, no name. Inside, a photo, a cockpit view of snow-capped peaks, a scarred hand gripping the stick, and one phrase handwritten in ink, "Not all wings leave contrails." In Qatar, Hall B remained unchanged. Tourists came, soldiers came, children pointed, veterans saluted. One day, a girl about 12 years old stood before the scar hologram. She turned to her father. "Did she ever come back?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "No, but she left something better." "What?" "Proof." The girl stared at the wings, at the burn-shaped map across the digital backdrop. She whispered, "I want to fly like her." Her father nodded. "Then remember the path." In a quiet canyon somewhere east of the Black Sea, a single aircraft flew low between cliffs. Its transponder is silent, its pilot is unseen. But its purpose, etched clearly in the way it moved, precise, impossible, fearless. The sun over the Caucasus burned white against a cobalt sky. Far below, between fractured ridgelines and Cold War ruins, a single aircraft sliced around the bend of a canyon, its wings nearly brushing the cliff face. There was no radar ping, no flight plan, just the ghost shadow of something once erased, now rewriting its own coordinates. Colleen Harper didn't fly with permission anymore. She flew on instinct, on memory, on scars. The world had spent years trying to erase her, so she became a whisper it couldn't trace. Her route today, a crooked arc over Georgia, knifing past the Turkish border before dipping dangerously low near the Armenian frontier. Her flight path was a defiance etched in motion, curved, improvised, impossible to predict. In the cockpit of her modified G-146, a relic she had restored by hand, the controls trembled like nerves. A proximity alarm blinked red, terrain alert. She muted it without looking. Her eyes never left the ridgeline. From the side panel, she pulled a photo, Reza's image. That moment frozen mid-turn, nose down, her face locked with resolve. She taped it above the altimeter. In faded ink, no one expected you to make it. By nightfall, she landed in a scorched basin near Van, Turkey. No lights, no signal, just sand, rock and stillness. She cloaked the aircraft with thermal sheets and launched a drone perimeter. 2 hours passed. A jeep arrived without headlights. Civilian plates, military posture. 3 people emerged, 2 men and a woman. Colleen stepped out from the shadows, arms folded. "You're late." The driver grinned. "Checkpoint wedding." Smugglers in tuxedos move faster. The woman handed her a drive. "Everything you asked for." Colleen pocketed it, and the gear, the rear trunk popped. Inside a wingsuit, custom carbon-reinforced matte gray. She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not skydiving into a wedding." The second man replied, "Not a wedding, a black site, Armenian side, hidden under an agri-research cover." Colleen nodded once. "Window? 72 hours. 10-minute opening. Extraction impossible if missed. And if I'm caught? You weren't here." That night, buried in a rock shelter, Colleen watched the drive's contents flicker across her screen. Infrared scans, electromagnetic sweeps, shifting patrol grids. This wasn't espionage, this was exorcism. Target, a facility near Lake Sevan. Codename, TH4L. Assets inside 3, 1 Russian defector, 2 unidentified operatives, call signs Citrine and Wren. No trial, no press, no retrieval. Colleen didn't need to ask why, she only mapped how. She studied wind vectors, recalibrated for magnetic deviation, reprogrammed altitude thresholds. Sleep never came. There wasn't time for dreams. Dawn, the jump point loomed above the tree line, wind-shorn and steep. Below, a canyon, a frozen waterfall, a concealed slope facing west. Colleen ran. The leap tore the sky open. Her suit caught air like a blade. Below her, the earth spun into vectors. She shifted weight, curved left, then dove. No flares, no comms, just speed. She was silent. She was flame. The facility emerged in a smear of metal and shadow. She clipped the outer wall, rolled, hit gravel, vanished into the ducts. No alarms, not yet. Inside, darkness, concrete, rot, guards with mismatched weapons and tired Russian-Armenian drawls. She bypassed the main door using an extracted heat signature chip, lifted from a grounded maintenance drone. The cells were sealed behind magnetic locks. She found them anyway. Citrine woman, late 40 seconds, bruised but awake. Wren man, maybe 30, quiet eyes, hands shaking. Defector, silent, bleeding. "Move," Colleen said. They stared. She lit a flare. The hallway burned red. They ran. Vent shafts, back stairwells, one-time charge placed by the transformer unit. Colleen detonated the grid. The east wing flickered. Alarms shrieked. No vehicle came, just shadows and river mud. 6 hours they hiked. Colleen never looked back. Checkpoint lights blurred behind them. Boots sunk in frost. They never stopped. At cliff's edge before the final descent, the G-146 awaited, half-covered, patient. Wren finally spoke. "Are you real?" Colleen strapped in. "Only when I'm flying." The turbines screamed. They lifted off into wind shear, dodging infrared arcs, ducking blind satellite sweeps. The sky roared. The mission blinked off every screen that tried to find it, and for the second time in her life, Colleen Harper vanished between borders. But this time, she wasn't alone. The wind over the Caspian cracked like a whip as the G-146 leveled out at low altitude, hugging the contours of the water with ghost-like precision. Colleen's hands were steady on the stick. her eyes scanning the horizon, calculating the distance to the next blind zone where satellite coverage would be interrupted for just long enough to change course without leaving a digital fingerprint. In the back of the aircraft, the 3 passengers remained silent. Citrine sat with her head back against the wall, eyes closed but never asleep. Ren stared into the metal floor as if memorizing every dent. The Russian defector, whose name none of them had spoken aloud, was working on a loose panel with a paperclip, nervously fixing a transmitter he hadn't been told to touch. Colleen didn't stop him. She just kept flying. Below them, the sea turned from slate to silver as morning light cracked over the eastern horizon. They touched down at an abandoned Soviet airfield east of Baku. Wheels screeching lightly before the aircraft rolled to a silent stop. A waiting van appeared from behind a ruined hangar, headlights off, 2 figures inside. No insignia, no welcome, only a silent nod and the hiss of an opening door. Citrine helped Ren down the ramp. The Russian stood on the tarmac for a moment, then turned to Colleen. "You don't want to know who I am?" he asked. "Not my business," she replied, "but I'll tell you anyway," he said. "I was the one who sold the location of Featherblind's target in 2011. I was the reason they were trapped." Colleen stared at him. "And yet you were still inside," she said. "So, maybe you paid for it." She turned away. "Or maybe you still owe." He didn't reply. The van pulled away and disappeared into the rising dust. Colleen stood alone beside the G-146, letting the wind whip through her jacket. No one came. No one hailed her. That was the point. She fueled the aircraft herself, checked the wings, and ran a systems diagnostic with fingers that never trembled. She didn't sleep that night. She didn't need to. Her body knew how to keep going when the mission wasn't done. By midday, she was airborne again, heading west. Somewhere between Tbilisi and the Black Sea, a coded signal blinked onto her console. One word: trace. She banked left, altered her transponder signature, and dropped altitude. If someone had tracked the last extraction, they'd want to find her. She wasn't about to be found. Trace wasn't a warning. It was a command. It meant to follow the trail but not to be seen. It meant something had gone wrong. Again. 2 hours later, Colleen landed at a fuel point in southern Georgia. A man in a long coat greeted her with a sealed envelope and no words. Inside was a map overlay, a handwritten note in French, and a flash drive containing encrypted surveillance footage. She reviewed it in the cockpit. The footage was grainy, but the location was unmistakable, a temporary detention facility on the outskirts of Aleppo, Syria. The note was short: Asset Echo 3 compromised. Immediate risk. Minimal window. Colleen looked at the coordinates, checked her aircraft's range, calculated altitude masks over Turkish airspace, and nodded to herself. By nightfall, she was back in the sky. She crossed into Syrian airspace without a ping. The facility was a ghost compound built inside a cratered village, surrounded by old minarets and newer fences. Her approach vector took her through a narrow corridor only accessible in pre-dawn conditions when light confused the thermal signatures. She circled once, then twice, before dropping behind a ridge and cutting power. The aircraft slid the last 100 meters like a glider. She stepped out and disappeared into the ruins. Inside the compound, there were 12 guards and 1 prisoner. Echo 3 was chained in an underground chamber with no lights and 3 cameras that didn't record. She bypassed the entry alarm, took down 1 guard with a silent chokehold, and moved through the corridors with methodical silence. The lock on the cell was analog. She picked it in 7 seconds. Echo 3 looked up, dazed. "Who sent you?" he whispered. "No one," Colleen said. "You're not supposed to exist." "Neither are you," he replied. She cut the chain, gave him a cloth to bind his wound, and pulled him up. They escaped through a sewer trench that led beneath the mosque ruins. When they emerged, the G-146 was already powering up. The extraction took 5 minutes. The air was electric with static and pre-morning heat. She flew them west, cutting across Iraq, then dipping low into Jordanian airspace. Her contact in Amman secured them a temporary hangar in a textile warehouse. Echo 3 sat in the dark for 10 minutes before speaking. "They'll come for me again," he said. "They always do." Colleen handed him a burner phone and a small envelope. Inside was a photo of a scar, a flight path. "Then don't wait," she said. "Become harder to find." The next day, as Colleen prepared to leave, her aircraft was blocked by 2 vehicles. Men stepped out, dressed like customs officers, but their eyes said otherwise. One held a clipboard. "You don't have permission to fly." "I never do," Colleen said. "And you're not customs." The man smiled. "Your file resurfaced. Certain people think you're becoming a problem." Colleen tilted her head. "Then they should have erased me better." One of the men moved toward her. She stepped forward. "I've flown through things you can't pronounce. Do you really want to try me on solid ground?" The man hesitated. His partner shook his head. "Let her go." They returned to their vehicles and drove away. Colleen took off without another word. By the time she landed again, this time in Cyprus, she'd changed her transponder ID 3 more times and sent 2 ghost pings back toward the airfield in Amman to confuse any tail. She slept for 4 hours in a hangar with one eye open, then rose and took to the sky again. Her movements weren't random. They were recursive. Spiral paths are designed to force anyone tracking her to burn resources without a pattern. She didn't just fly to reach places. She flew to rewrite the shape of pursuit. That night, a secure message hit 4 private inboxes in 4 different countries. It contained no words, only coordinates. The recipients were each once part of missions that never made it into records. They had scars like hers. They all opened the file, and they all started packing. The desert outside Al Tortula burned with an ancient fury. Sun-baked stone and silence so thick it swallowed sound. Wind licked across the cliffs, dragging sand like whispers across the bones of lost civilizations. And on the crumbling edge of an abandoned airstrip, a lone aircraft descended under the gaze of a colorless moon. No tower clearance, no chatter, no radar signatures for 300 miles. Exactly how Colleen Harper wanted it. She stepped from the G-146 in a dust-smeared flight jacket and boots worn to memory, her shadow long and sharp in the glow of a portable halogen beacon. 4 others emerged from the darkness, approaching from different compass points. No greetings, no ranks, only presence. A woman limped forward, half her face obscured by a sand-colored scarf. Another carried a medkit marked in Persian script but wore a faded French Legion insignia. A third, tall, scarred, built like history, nodded silently. Then came Leah Naveau. They formed a rough circle. Said nothing. "Let the air speak first." Then Leah broke the silence. "We all got the coordinates. We all knew who it came from." Colleen nodded. "You weren't summoned. You were remembered," the limping woman asked flatly. "Remembered for what? That we don't vanish. We resurface when the silence starts screaming." The tall man murmured, "And what are we now?" Colleen didn't blink. Not a team, not a flag, not a unit. Just the echo of every mission the world tried to bury. We step in when history pretends we never existed. Leah crossed her arms. "So who decides when?" Colleen flipped a tablet onto a crate. A heat map appeared, zones flickering in spectral overlays, glitches, contradictions. The pattern does. The medic leaned closer. "You've been tracking multi-nation denials." "I've been watching for the lie that tells on itself," Colleen said. "Places 3 governments swear don't exist, but night flights still land, where ghosts walk in but no one walks out. They worked through the night. decrypting fragmented chatter and triangulating telemetry. 6 anomalies emerged. One screamed louder than the rest. V09. Horn of Africa. 12 inbound flights. No outbounds. Leah's jaw tensed. Extraction site or prison? Neither confirmed, Colleen said. But it matches the EM signature of a ghost facility I missed in 2013. The scarred man cracked his knuckles. Then we don't miss again. By dawn, plans snapped into place. They would arrive separately, no overlapping paths. One would create diplomatic chaos in Djibouti, another would fake a medical disaster. Colleen would come last, disguised under the name of a defunct UN relief mission, resurrected just long enough to pass scrutiny. 3 days later, her aircraft bore a red crescent emblem. As it touched down near Mogadishu, she offloaded 5 crates. 4 carried medical aid. The 5th held a collapsible bike, silenced firearms and cloaks that turned warmth into shadow. At nightfall, she rode east across gravel flats, guided by terrain beacons buried beneath fake weather towers. 8 hours later, she reached Zone V-9's threshold. From above, it was invisible. From the ground, it was breath held too long. Cut into rock and disguised with heat sinks, the complex was a network of deception. Patrol drones carved precise arcs every 32 minutes. Pressure sensors hid beneath salt brush. She belly crawled 2 kilometers, using a hollow satellite dish to scatter thermal readings. Her entry, an unused flood culvert. Inside, every wall felt like a secret. She ghosted through ducts and unlit tunnels, counting steps, calibrating air drafts. 2 hours in, she found the observation chamber. 12 detainees, grey suits, soundproof cells, movement barely human. No files, no names, just vanishing made flesh. She took 3 photos, tagged them with a quantum signal, then began planting charges, and then the alarm. But not from her. From Leah. She had launched phase 2 early, drawing security to a mock checkpoint miles away. It was time. Colleen detonated structural points, rode a duck drop 2 stories, hit the ground rolling. Sirens erupted. She cut through the chaos. The first 4 prisoners she freed barely reacted. Eyes wide, bodies numb, but they moved when she pulled the flare. The hall turned crimson. The medic met her at the next junction, bleeding from a shoulder shot but moving fast. They pulled the detainees through an elevator shaft, hands gripping rusted cable. Dust caked everything, no one spoke. At the surface, the scarred man waited in a commandeered mining truck. Its dashboard was ripped out, GPS disabled. The engine sounded like the last breath of a dying beast. They drove 27 miles of dry gulch, no tail, no sign. Only the rasp of tires against bone-dry stone. At the exfil point, a cargo plane, no insignia, no lights, tail ramp yawning like an invitation. As the last detainees climbed aboard, one paused. "You're not one of them." He turned, looked harder. "You're not one of us either." Colleen said nothing, just handed him a field pack, then turned. The plane lifted into the black, and Colleen Harper vanished back into the world's blind spot where only ghosts fly. The night air above Sudan was thick with dust and static, the kind of electric tension that rolled in before a sandstorm but stayed long after the wind had passed. Colleen Harper moved through it like she belonged to it. She had crossed into the Darfur region under the cover of a medical survey, her credentials borrowed from a non-governmental entity that didn't exist on any recent registry. Her eyes were shielded by sand goggles, her jacket tagged with a faded emblem no one could verify, and her mind was already 6 steps ahead. The mission in Zone V-9 had rattled the silence. Someone somewhere had felt it. You couldn't unburn a name once it was whispered again. And Colleen's name once scorched off record, was beginning to echo in places it was never meant to reach. She had left the cargo plane hours before the others landed. She rode alone across a stretch of deadland in a salvaged rover, heading toward a communication tower that still blinked its status light long after the agency funding it had collapsed. The tower had become a relay point for rogue transmissions, military deserters, intelligence ghosts, unaffiliated operatives who still ran missions but answered to no flag. At its base, she found what she expected, a cache, buried under plastic sheeting and rocks. Inside a corroded case wrapped in mylar were 5 drives, each marked with outdated NATO ciphers. She scanned them with a mobile decryptor. 4 were corrupted, the 5th came alive. The data wasn't a report. It was a ledger. Coded names, half-mapped coordinates, incident identifiers tied to black budget operations. Most had no timestamps, but 3 did, and they all matched missions Colleen knew firsthand. One of them had a code name she hadn't heard in over 15 years, Cinder Phase. That name wasn't just personal, it was haunting. It was the name of a mission Colleen had aborted mid-operation, a ghost op meant to take out a mobile weapons lab during her first deployment under unofficial command. She'd called it off when she realized the lab had been converted into a refugee camp to mask its heat signature. She had walked away, and then someone else had gone in and pulled the trigger. She had never forgiven herself for not stopping them. Now the name was back. At a crude field terminal linked to a stolen satellite channel, she initiated a dead relay to one of the 4 Echo operatives, Leah Navot. Within 6 hours, a response came through. The name had resurfaced in chatter between a contractor group operating out of southern Libya and a logistics node in Greece. It wasn't just memory anymore, it was a movement. Colleen recalibrated up. She left Darfur by night, crossed the border disguised as a medical relief courier, and reached Seba 2 days later. There, in the shadows of a supply depot used as a staging point for various private militias, she found the next clue. A shipping manifest showed the transport of mobile chemical containment tanks, sealed in unmarked crates. Destination unknown. Origin post-phase recovery. That phrase meant nothing to most, but Colleen recognized it. It meant Cinder Phase hadn't been shut down. It had been absorbed. That night, she infiltrated the depot. Cameras were minimal, guards uninterested. She broke into a rear module, sliced a lockbox, and retrieved an internal GPS unit. The route showed multiple drop points along the border with Niger, but one coordinate was marked differently. Not a delivery, but a return. A closed loop. She memorized the number and destroyed the device. 3 days later, she stood in the middle of a barren flat where nothing grew and nothing echoed. Her aircraft sat idle behind a dune. A single transport truck approached from the north, slow and heavy. When it reached the coordinate, it stopped. 5 minutes passed. Then 2 men got out, walked 10 paces into the open desert and began digging. Colleen watched from a scope. They were unarmed but alert. She moved on foot, circled wide, and approached low. It took her 15 minutes to reach the truck's far blind side. There, behind a tarped crate, she found it, a black canister stamped with an identifier she knew by heart. It had once belonged to the destroyed convoy from the aborted Cinder Phase op. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared. Then, a voice behind her. "You should have stayed a ghost." Colleen turned slowly. A man stood there, tall, older, in fatigues with no name patch. His eyes were hard. His posture was casual, but his sidearm wasn't holstered. "I know you," she said. "You knew me," he corrected. "Back before you started rewriting your own record, you were part of Phase Command." "I still am." "What is this?" she asked. "Recovery or cleanup?" "Control," he said. "Same as it's always been. You're just old enough now to see the corners they used to let you ignore." She didn't answer. The wind picked up, sand lifted between them. "You think you're building something," he added. "This little whisper network. These missions no one asked you to fly. You think people won't notice? They already have," she said. "And they still couldn't stop me," he smirked. "Not yet. I have what I need," she said. "You don't have time to use it." She looked at his weapon. "You're not going to shoot me. You're going to report that you did. You're going to bury me twice, just like they asked. And when they ask for proof, you'll send them footage of a body with a scar in the wrong place." He didn't reply, but he didn't raise the gun either. Colleen stepped back slowly, then turned and walked away. No shot came, no order stopped her. She flew out that night under cloud cover and scattered jamming bursts. The canister location, the route, the unit patch, all uploaded to an encrypted archive now split across 6 networks in 6 countries. One message sent to each Echo operative. No words. Just the file header, "Cinder lives." By the end of the week, 3 other ghosts had gone dark. Not missing. Embedded. Something bigger had begun. They met beneath the ruins of an airfield that no longer had a name. Somewhere between the edge of Niger and the first breath of Algeria, where the heat folded into the dust and the sky bent lower with every hour, the Echo Circle gathered again. No flags, no uniforms, just a purpose. Colleen arrived last, her flight path untraceable, her aircraft cloaked in the same patched paint that had carried her through Tehran, Syria, and beyond. Leah Navot was already there, checking satellite feeds on a hardened tablet. The paratrooper stood near a dismantled drone, modifying its optics with gear that wasn't supposed to exist. The medic knelt beside a map drawn by hand, updated with pen strokes and memory, and the woman with the limp, the one they only called Vera, stood silently, staring at the sky as if she expected it to split open again. Colleen dropped her pack without ceremony. Cinder confirmed, "It's not a ghost. It's metastasized." Leah nodded. "We intercepted chatter last night. Logistics transfers moving between ghost depots in Mali, Chad, and southern Algeria, all routed under humanitarian cover. But the manifests are off. Too many containers, not enough aid." Vera spoke without turning. "Same pattern we saw before Featherblind," Colleen replied, "except this time they're expecting us." The paratrooper unfolded a thermal map. "They've weaponized silence. Detainees without files. Convoys without origins. Facilities that vanish from every satellite pass, only to reappear with the same thermal signature 400 miles away." The medic added, "Even ghosts leave shadows." "We've mapped 3 sites. One is a relay node. Communications traffic is masked as refugee intake data. Another's a logistics hub. Third, we think it's storage. For what, we don't know. But the traffic patterns suggest rotation. Something's moving in and out every 6 days." Colleen's eyes narrowed. "Then we hit all 3. At once." Silence fell, then nods followed. No arguments, no doubts, just execution. The plan came together without directives. Vera would intercept and corrupt the supply manifest stream, rerouting key files to bait a response. The medic and the paratrooper would breach the logistics hub under the cover of a heatwave evacuation protocol. Leah would fly solo to the relay station, deploy an embedded worm, and trigger a backflow of data that exposed recipient nodes across 6 continents. Colleen? She would go to the final site alone, the one no one had mapped, the one no one had seen, but which every pattern pointed toward. She left that night. No send-off, no farewell. She flew low over desert and scrub, then higher above dry ridges shaped by time and violence. Her aircraft skimmed just under radar nets she'd memorized years ago, adjusted for today. She dropped beacons into dried riverbeds, marked her trajectory with signal bursts so low they folded into background M noise. It wasn't stealth. It was surrendering to invisibility, becoming what the enemy thought they'd already buried. The target location had no gate, no airstrip, Just a circle of solar panels embedded in a salt flat, arranged in a formation too precise to be accidental. From above it looked like infrastructure. From below it was an entrance. Colleen landed 5 miles away, buried her comms in a sand-filled casing, walked alone under the mid-morning sun, carrying nothing but a field knife, a thermal pulsimeter, and a coin. She approached the outer perimeter. No guards, no towers, just air too quiet, wind too still. Then a hatch opened, without sound, without smoke, just a shift in air pressure. She stepped inside. It took 6 minutes to descend 4 levels. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly. Everything was modular, white and sterile. Not military, not corporate, something in between. A voice greeted her, not through speakers, from a person. A woman in a slate-grey suit, clipboard in hand, expression unreadable. "Colleen Harper," she said calmly. "You're late." Colleen didn't answer. The woman gestured to a screen. "You want the truth, but you already know it. You think Cinder is a threat. It's not. It's a decision. One your country made, one your allies approved. Continuity through deniability, control through disavowal." Colleen stepped forward. "You kill ghosts because they don't ask permission. You built Cinder to erase everything you couldn't program. We built Cinder to prevent chaos. You built it to bury consequences." The woman smiled faintly. "And yet, here you are, walking into it." Colleen raised the emitter. "I don't need to win. I just need to end it." The woman's smile vanished. "You'll expose nothing. You'll burn the tip of a network that reconfigures every 8 hours. Colleen stepped closer. "Then I'll burn it every 8 hours. She dropped the emitter. It activated on contact. Lights flickered. Air shifted. Doors unlocked. Somewhere above, Leah's worm was triggering data backflow. The medic's sabotage flooded the logistics hub. Vera's false manifest injected chaos into procurement systems. The paratroopers' heatwave diversion grounded 3 transport routes. Everything synchronized. Colleen turned and walked toward the core. Inside, rows of data nodes blinked. She took the coin from her pocket, the same one she'd left at Hall B, the same one etched with the flight path no one believed. She wedged it into the control panel, triggered a hard short. The lights went dark, files corrupted, uplinks severed. By the time the countermeasures were activated, she was gone. Outside, a relay drone picked up her signal. It pulsed once, then vanished over the horizon. Somewhere in 6 capitals, terminals blinked, maps redrew themselves, names resurfaced, and silence began to fracture. There's a strange silence that follows the end of a mission. It's not the kind that fills a room when someone leaves or the hush of an audience waiting for an encore. It's heavier than that, deeper, like the silence after a name has been erased, or when history skips a beat and no one corrects it. That's the silence Colleen Harper left behind. Cinder fell, but it didn't collapse all at once. It cracked in layers. Data first, then protocols, then trust. In embassies and operations centers around the world, analysts opened files they didn't know existed. Names long thought dead resurfaced. Flight logs, once scrubbed, reappeared with full coordinates. Whole missions once deemed accidents were exposed as deliberate deletions. But even as Cinder fragmented, no one made public statements. There were no headlines, no tribunals, just reassignments, closed-door reviews, and quiet relocations. In the shadows, power learned to flinch. Colleen disappeared again, not out of fear, out of purpose. She had never wanted medals, never wanted recognition. She had stepped forward only when the story twisted so hard that it threatened to snap. When the truth became too fragile to survive on its own, she became its shield. Her scars were never meant to decorate a legacy. They were waypoints, directions etched into flesh so that others might find their way through silence. Echo Flight remained, not as a unit but as a pattern, A network of those who knew that some fights weren't about glory, but about remembering. They operated without banners, without rank. Some returned to quiet lives. Others stayed in motion, bouncing between zones of conflict, lending hands and eyes where systems had gone blind. Their allegiance wasn't to governments, it was to truth. Leah Navot eventually left the Israeli Defense Forces. She took a position as a civilian consultant in an international aviation safety group, helping restructure transparency protocols between military and humanitarian flight corridors. The medic returned to a refugee aid convoy outside Mosul. The paratrooper vanished into the Central African highlands. Vera, no one quite knew what happened to her, only that her messages sometimes appeared in encrypted forums tagged with coordinates and warnings. And then, one day, the scar returned. It wasn't Colleen, not directly, but a young girl in southern Spain, age 16, posted a photo of her back, a pattern of burns, intentional, shaped like a spiral flight path. She said she didn't know why she did it, only that she had seen it in a dream. Thousands shared the post. Some called it a hoax, others a tribute, but those who had once flown in silence recognized it for what it was, a relay. Proof that the signal had made it. What did it all mean? It meant that stories buried too deep eventually push their way back to the surface, that even if you scorch a name from the page, you can't stop the shadow it leaves behind. That justice isn't always a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it's a message passed between those who've survived erasure, a quiet nod that says, "I saw what they did to you, I'm still here too." And sometimes, rarely, it's a flight path, scratched into a map, inked into skin, etched into memory. For those watching, wondering, or whispering, Colleen Harper's story isn't just about a mission. It's about refusal. The refusal to let others dictate who you were. The refusal to let silence win. And the refusal to stay down when history decides you're too inconvenient to be remembered. Somewhere, even now, a signal moves through the noise. Maybe it's in a comm line disguised as static. Maybe it's a drive passed from one hand to another in a coffee shop. Maybe it's just a look between two people in an airport terminal who know better than to speak out loud. But the message remains: they tried to erase her. They failed. And because of that, others won't be erased so easily. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone or opened your eyes to the world between the headlines, share it. Tell someone, carry it, not because Colleen Harper needs to be known, but because someone else somewhere needs to know they're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, stories of truth, of shadows, of resistance, not through rage but through resilience, stay with us. This is Veteran Biker, where silence ends and memory begins. Wherever you are, thank you for watching. Let us know in the comments what part of Colleen's story stayed with you the most. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still believes that quiet doesn't mean powerless. Because sometimes the quiet ones fly the farthest. See you in the next story.